Padre Pio gazed intently at the man kneeling before him in the confessional booth and spoke words that no one expected. He told the man that he was among the closest to God he had seen that week. The man was shocked because he had come to confess the very opposite. He had come to confess that he was doubting everything, doubting the church, doubting his faith, doubting God himself. He believed he was the furthest from God in that entire church. Yet Padre Pio claimed he was the closest. How could this be? What I'm about to reveal about what Padre Pio saw in those who doubted will completely change how you understand doubt. Because most people believe that doubting is a sin. They believe doubting is a weakness. They believe doubting is a one-way ticket to hell. But Padre Pio saw something different. He saw that doubt could be one of the greatest gifts God gives a soul, or it could be the gateway to total destruction. It all hinged on one thing. Before we go any further, it's crucial that you understand the distinction Padre Pio made between two types of doubt, because not all doubt is created equal, and confusing the two can cost you your soul. The first type of doubt Padre Pio called honest doubt. It's the doubt of someone who is genuinely seeking the truth, the doubt of someone who doesn't accept easy answers, the doubt of someone who wants to understand, not just parrot. This doubt, Padre Pio said, is sacred. It's the fuel that propels the soul towards God. The second type of doubt he called arrogant doubt. It's the doubt of someone who is determined to be right, the doubt of someone who uses questions as an excuse not to obey, the doubt of someone who claims to be seeking truth, but in reality has already decided they don't want to find it. This doubt, Padre Pio warned, is deadly. It's the doorway through which the devil enters to destroy faith. That man in the confessional booth possessed honest doubt. He was suffering because of his questions. He was distressed and desperately searching for answers. He didn't want to doubt. He wanted to believe. But he couldn't ignore the questions that arose in his mind. And Padre Pio recognized that this struggle was holy, that this suffering was a purification, that at the end of that tunnel of doubt, this man would find a faith stronger than he had ever known. Padre Pio then shared the story of another man who had gone through a similar ordeal, a man who, for years, had been the most devout Catholic in his town. He attended Mass every day. He prayed the rosary multiple times. He fasted. He gave alms to the poor. The community considered him a saint. But one day, this man woke up and realized he felt nothing. The prayers that once filled him with peace now seemed like empty words. The Mass that once moved him to tears now felt like a meaningless ritual. And a question began to haunt his mind. What if none of this is real? What if God doesn't exist? What if I've wasted my entire life on a lie? This man panicked. He thought he was losing his faith. He thought he was being abandoned by God. He thought he had committed some terrible sin and was being punished. He sought out Padre Pio in desperation, fearing he would be condemned. But Padre Pio greeted him with a smile. He told the man that he wasn't losing his faith. He was being invited to a deeper faith. He explained that faith based on feelings is fragile. Faith based on emotions is unstable. And God was removing these supports so that the man could learn to believe without feeling, to trust without seeing, to love without receiving anything in return. Padre Pio explained that this had a name in the mystical tradition. It was called the dark night of the soul. And it wasn't a punishment. It was a promotion. It was God inviting that soul to a deeper level of intimacy, a level where faith doesn't depend on consolations, where love doesn't depend on rewards, where trust is absolute, even when everything seems desolate. And Padre Pio knew this experience well, because he himself had gone through it. For years, Padre Pio felt God's presence intensely. He saw Jesus. He saw Mary. He experienced mystical ecstasies. He felt a constant supernatural joy. But there were periods when all of that vanished. Periods when Padre Pio felt completely alone. Periods when he prayed and it seemed his words just bounced off the ceiling and came back to him. Periods when he wondered if everything he had experienced was real or just his imagination. And in those periods, Padre Pio learned something precious. He learned that true faith isn't feeling God's presence. It's trusting in God's presence even when you feel nothing. He learned that true love isn't loving when you feel loved. It's loving even when you feel abandoned. He learned that true prayer isn't talking to God when he answers. It's talking to God even when the silence seems eternal. Padre Pio described one of those dark nights that he lived through. It was a period of almost 2 years when he felt absolutely nothing. He celebrated Mass, and it felt like he was speaking into a void. He prayed the breviary, and the words seemed dead. He looked at the crucifix and felt no consolation. And what was worse, during this period, the temptations were intense, thoughts of despair, thoughts that everything was a lie, thoughts that he had wasted his life. The devil exploited God's silence to whisper his lies. But Padre Pio persevered. He continued celebrating Mass even without feeling anything. He continued praying even without consolation. He continued serving the faithful even when everything seemed empty. And it was precisely this perseverance that strengthened his faith in a way that no mystical experience ever could. He said those 2 years of darkness were worth more than 20 years of consolations, because in the consolations he loved God's gifts. In the darkness, he learned to love God himself, without gifts, without rewards, without anything but bare faith. There was a friar who lived with Padre Pio during one of these dark nights and recounted what he saw. He said that Padre Pio celebrated Mass with tears streaming down his face, not tears of emotion, tears of effort, tears of someone fighting against an enormous weight, but refusing to give up. This friar asked Padre Pio how he managed to continue, and Padre Pio answered something that marked that friar forever. He said that it wasn't him who was continuing. It was God's grace that sustained him, even when he didn't feel it. He said that faith wasn't his merit, it was a gift, and he simply refused to let go of the gift, even when the gift seemed to have disappeared. And there was another case that Padre Pio knew intimately, a religious sister who went through a dark night that lasted over a decade. 10 years without feeling God's presence, 10 years praying to a heaven that seemed empty, 10 years serving a God who seemed to have abandoned her. This religious sister came to Padre Pio multiple times during this period, each time more desperate, each time more exhausted. She asked if she should abandon religious life altogether. She wondered if God truly existed. She wondered if her entire life had been a lie, and Padre Pio, each and every time, sent her back to prayer. He told her to continue. He told her the darkness would pass. He said that on the other side of that night, there was a dawn she couldn't even imagine. The nun obeyed, but it became harder and harder each day, until one day, after almost 11 years, something shifted. She was praying Vespers as she did every day, feeling nothing as usual, when suddenly she was overcome by a presence that almost knocked her over, a presence of love so intense she could barely breathe, a certainty so absolute that all the doubts of 11 years evaporated in a single second. She ran to Padre Pio to tell him, and Padre Pio simply smiled. He said he knew it would happen. He said he had seen in the spiritual world the work that God was doing in her soul during all those years of darkness. He said the night had been necessary so that the dawn would be so glorious. That nun lived another 30 years after that experience, and she never doubted again, not because she never had questions again, but because she had experienced something that no question could erase. She had touched a reality that no argument could refute. And this lesson Padre Pio passed on to all who came to him with doubts. He said that honest doubt was the soil where the strongest faith was born, that the saints who trusted God the most were the ones who doubted the most before. That faith that has never been tested is not faith, it's just habit. But there was the other kind of doubt, arrogant doubt, and Padre Pio treated that completely differently. He would tell the story of a man who came to him, saying he had many questions about faith, that he needed answers before he could believe, that he was a rational man and couldn't accept things without evidence. Padre Pio listened to the man's questions and then said something the man didn't expect. He said that his questions weren't honest, that he didn't want answers, he wanted excuses, that he was using intellectuality as a shield so he wouldn't have to change his life. The man became furious. He said Padre Pio didn't understand, that he was a cultured man, that he had read philosophy, that his doubts were legitimate. And Padre Pio responded. He said he knew men much more cultured than him, who were deeply believing. He said that intelligence doesn't prevent faith, pride does. And that man's problem wasn't intellectual, it was moral. There were sins he didn't want to abandon, and as long as he didn't abandon them, he would always find excuses not to believe. Padre Pio saw in the spiritual world what was happening. He saw that that man had a secret vice that no one knew about, a vice that shamed him. And he knew that if he accepted the Catholic faith completely, he would have to abandon that vice. So unconsciously, he created intellectual doubts so he wouldn't have to face his moral doubts. This is the type of doubt that Padre Pio called mortal, because it doesn't seek the truth, it flees from the truth. It uses reason as an excuse not to obey. And the more a person feeds this type of doubt, the more they distance themselves from God. Not because God abandons them, but because they choose to distance themselves. Padre Pio would tell another story that illustrated this type of doubt perfectly. A famous doctor came to him, full of scientific questions about miracles. He said it was impossible for bodies to be resurrected. It was impossible for water to turn into wine. It was impossible for a man to walk on water. Science proved that these things couldn't happen. Padre Pio listened to all the objections and then asked the doctor about his personal life. The doctor was disconcerted. What did his personal life have to do with miracles? Padre Pio was direct. He asked if the doctor was faithful to his wife. The doctor turned red. He tried to change the subject, but Padre Pio insisted. And finally, the doctor admitted that he had had a mistress for years. Padre Pio then explained the doctor's problem wasn't scientific, it was moral. He knew that if he accepted the Catholic faith, he would have to abandon the mistress, he would have to confess his sin, he would have to change his life, and he didn't want to do that. So, he created scientific objections as an excuse. Padre Pio told the doctor that no rational argument would convince him as long as he was living in sin, because sin blinds. Sin creates a spiritual fog that prevents a person from seeing the truth. First, he needed to resolve the moral issue. Then, the intellectual questions would resolve themselves. The doctor became furious. He left saying that Padre Pio was a fanatic who didn't understand science. But the seed had been planted. In the following months, he couldn't get Padre Pio's words out of his head. A year later, the doctor returned. He had ended the affair with the mistress. He had confessed to a priest. He had begun to change his life. And he said something surprising. He said that now he understood the miracles, not because he had found new arguments, but because his soul had been cleansed, and with a clean soul, he could see what had been blocked before. Padre Pio smiled. He said that's how it worked. Faith isn't primarily a matter of logic, it's a matter of the heart. and a dirty heart can't see God, no matter how many arguments it receives. But a clean heart sees God everywhere, even without any arguments. Padre Pio taught a simple test to know what type of doubt a person had. He would ask like this: if God appeared now and proved that he exists, would you change your life? Would you abandon your sins? Would you obey completely? If the answer was yes, the doubt was honest. The person really wanted to know the truth and was willing to follow it. If the answer was no or maybe, the doubt was arrogant. The person didn't want truth. He wanted permission to continue living as he lived. And there were cases where Padre Pio saw the transition from one type of doubt to another. He saw people who started with honest doubt, but even by not finding quick answers, let pride enter. They let impatience turn searching into rejection, and what could have been purification became destruction. He would tell the story of a young seminarian who began to have doubts about his vocation, honest doubts. Am I really called? Will I be able to live celibacy? Am I in the right place? Padre Pio advised him to take these doubts to prayer, to not be in a hurry, to trust that God would show him the way. The young man began to do this, but the answers didn't come quickly. The doubts continued, and the young man began to become impatient. Instead of continuing to pray, he began to rationalize. He began to say that the church was backward, that celibacy was impossible, that the priestly vocation didn't make sense in the modern world. His honest doubts turned into arrogant criticisms, and he abandoned the seminary, not because God showed him it wasn't his path, but because he grew tired of waiting for God's answer. Years later, that man returned to Padre Pio. He was destroyed. The marriage had failed, the career had crumbled, life had no meaning, and he finally understood. He had fled his vocation, not out of conviction, but out of impatience. He had transformed honest doubt into arrogant rejection, and he paid the price. Padre Pio welcomed him with mercy. He said it was never too late, that God was still calling him, that the path was still open. That man returned to the seminary, older now, more wounded, but finally ready to trust without seeing, to wait without guarantees, to obey without fully understanding. That man was ordained a priest at 45, and he said that every day of his priesthood was an act of gratitude because Padre Pio had been patient with him. He said that if Padre Pio had agreed with him when he abandoned the seminary, he would have destroyed his life. But Padre Pio saw what he couldn't see. He saw that the doubt was temporary, but the vocation was eternal. Padre Pio especially warned young people about the danger of transforming honest doubt into rejection. He said that youth was a time of natural questioning. It was normal to question the faith of their parents. It was normal to want to find their own truth. It was normal to have doubts about everything they had been taught. But there was a difference between questioning to find and questioning to reject. The young person who questions to find continues seeking. The young person who questions to reject only wants to justify what they've already decided. And Padre Pio saw many young people who started with honest doubts, but were influenced by atheist professors, by cynical friends, by a culture that ridicules faith. Little by little, their honest doubts were poisoned. What was once a search became rejection. What was once a question became a conclusion. For these young people, Padre Pio had specific advice. Before abandoning your faith, be sure you truly know it. Many young people abandon a faith they never truly understood. They abandon a caricature of faith, not the real faith. They abandon a childish version of faith, not a mature faith. He challenged young people to study the faith seriously before rejecting it, to read the great Catholic thinkers, to understand the arguments for truth, not just the stereotypes, to give the same seriousness to faith that they would give to any other area of study. And he said that if After studying seriously, after praying honestly, after seeking genuinely, the young person still decided that they didn't believe. At least they would have made an informed decision. At least they wouldn't have rejected something they never truly knew. And there was a lesson that Padre Pio repeatedly shared with those who struggled with doubts. He said that faith is not the absence of doubt. Faith is trusting despite the doubts. It's not having all the answers. It's trusting in whom has all the answers, even when he doesn't reveal them. He compared faith to a marriage. In marriage, you don't know everything about your spouse. You don't understand all their decisions. You don't agree with everything, but you trust. You trust because you know the character of the person. You trust because you have a history together. You trust because the love is greater than the doubts. With God, it's the same. You won't understand everything he does. You won't have answers for all the questions. You won't be able to rationally prove every aspect of the faith, but you can trust. You can trust because you know the character of God revealed in Jesus. You can trust because you have a history with him. You can trust because God's love is greater than your doubts. And Padre Pio warned about a specific danger of our time. He said that we live in an era that idolizes certainty, an era that thinks everything must be proven, that everything must be explained, that everything must be controlled. And this mentality is poison to faith. Because faith, by definition, is trusting in what is not seen. It's believing in what cannot be completely proven. It's surrendering control to someone greater. And the modern mentality resists all of that. It wants proof before believing. It wants guarantees before trusting. It wants control before surrendering. Padre Pio said that this mentality creates a generation of spiritually sterile people. People who know a lot but trust little. People who question everything but surrender to nothing. People who are afraid of seeming naive and therefore never experience the joy of simple faith. And he told the story of an intellectual woman, a university professor, who came to him filled with sophisticated questions about theology, questions about the problem of evil, questions about the historicity of the Gospels, questions about religious plurality. Padre Pio listened to all the questions, and then he asked a simple question. When was the last time you prayed on your knees like a child? The woman was speechless. It had been years since she had prayed like that. Her prayer had become intellectual, analysis of texts, theological reflection. But the simplicity of a child before the Father that she had lost a long time ago. Padre Pio said that there was the problem. She had transformed faith into an intellectual exercise, and faith is not primarily intellectual. It's relational. It's trusting in a person, not in a system of ideas. And her doubts weren't going to be resolved with more reading. They were going to be resolved with more surrender. He instructed her to stop reading theology for a month, that instead she should pray the rosary every day like a child, without analysis, without questioning, just repeating the words with an open heart, just placing herself before Mary, like a daughter before her mother. The woman thought it was ridiculous at first. She was an intellectual. How could she do something so simple? But she was desperate. Her doubts were destroying her. She decided to try. And something unexpected happened. In the second week, while praying the rosary, she began to cry. She didn't know why. The tears simply came. And with the tears came a peace she hadn't felt in years. A certainty that no philosophical argument had been able to give. A presence that no book had been able to transmit. Her intellectual questions weren't answered, but they ceased to matter because she had found something greater than answers. She had found someone, and in the presence of that someone, the questions dissolved into adoration. This experience of the professor illustrated something that Padre Pio repeatedly said: the difference between knowing about God and knowing God. Most people who doubt know a lot about God. They know theology, they know doctrine, they know arguments, but they have never met God for real. They have never had a real experience of presence. They have never heard God speak to their heart. And Padre Pio said that this was the problem of modern faith. A faith of the head, not of the heart. A faith of concepts, not of encounter. A faith that knows all about God, but doesn't know what it's like to be in His presence. Padre Pio told of a philosopher who came to him with a list of arguments against the existence of God. Logical arguments, well constructed, impressive from an academic point of view. The philosopher presented all the arguments, expecting Padre Pio to refute them one by one. But Padre Pio refuted nothing. Instead, he took the philosopher's hand and said simply, "Come with me." He led the philosopher to the chapel, knelt before the tabernacle, and remained silent for an entire hour. The philosopher didn't know what to do. He expected a debate. He received silence. He expected arguments. He received presence. And in that hour of silence, something happened that he couldn't explain. An unexplainable peace. A certainty that came from nowhere. A presence that no argument could create or destroy. When the hour ended, Padre Pio stood up and asked the philosopher, "Do you still want to debate?" The philosopher, each with tears in his eyes, said no. He said he had found the answer, not a logical answer, an experiential answer. He had found someone in that silence, and that someone was more real than any argument. Padre Pio said that's how faith worked. You could debate forever about the existence of God. You could create arguments and counter-arguments infinitely, but the only real proof was the encounter. It was experiencing the presence. It was knowing, not just knowing about. And that encounter could not be forced. It could not be fabricated, but it could be sought. It could be requested. It could be waited for with patience. And God, who desires to reveal Himself more than we desire to find Him, always responds when the heart is truly open. Padre Pio said that was the secret. Faith isn't having all the answers. It's knowing the one who has all the answers. And when you know Him for real, the questions don't disappear, but they lose the power to destroy. They become invitations to go deeper. They become steps on a staircase that rises to infinity. And there was a prayer that Padre Pio taught to those who struggled with doubts, a simple but powerful prayer. The prayer went like this: Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. I trust, help my distrust. I love, help my coldness. I don't have all the answers, but I have you. And you are greater than all my questions. I accept not understanding everything. I accept walking in the dark. I accept trusting without seeing, because I know that your hands hold me, even when I don't feel them. I know that your love surrounds me, even when I don't perceive it. I know that you are present, even when you seem absent. Help me to believe when everything in me wants to doubt. Help me to trust when everything in me wants to control. Help me to love when everything in me wants to flee. Amen. Padre Pio said that this prayer, prayed daily, especially in moments of greatest doubt, had the power to transform, because it placed the person in the right position, in the position of humility, in the position of surrender, in the position of trusting not in oneself, but in God. And there was one last teaching that Padre Pio gave about doubts. He said that doubt should never be faced alone, that the devil loves to isolate those who doubt, loves to make a person think they are the only one who has these questions, loves to create shame around doubt so that the person doesn't seek help. He recommended that those who doubted seek a spiritual director, someone trustworthy to share the questions with, someone who could help discern whether the doubt was honest or proud, someone who could accompany the process without judgment. And he also recommended reading the saints who had gone through doubts. Saint Teresa of Calcutta, for example, lived decades in a dark night of doubt. Saint John of the Cross wrote about the dark night of the soul from his own experience. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux faced terrible doubts about the existence of heaven in her last months of life. Knowing that the greatest saints doubted helped the person not to despair, to understand that doubt isn't a sign of weakness. It can be a sign of growth. It can be the path to a faith that is deeper and more true. Padre Pio spoke especially about Saint Teresa of Calcutta. She, who was seen by the world as a model of faith, lived almost 50 years in a dark night, almost 50 years without feeling the presence of God, almost 50 years of inner darkness, while serving the poorest of the poor. Letters she wrote to her spiritual directors, published after her death, reveal the intensity of her suffering. She wrote things like, "If there is a hell, it must be this. The silence and emptiness are so great that I look and do not see, I listen and do not hear." And even so, she continued serving, continued loving, continued praying, even when prayer seemed useless. And Padre Pio said that this perseverance was the most powerful proof of faith that the modern world has ever seen. Not the faith that feels God, the faith that serves God, even without feeling anything. He also spoke of St. Thomas, the apostle who doubted the resurrection. Many criticized Thomas for having doubted. But Padre Pio had another perspective. He said that Thomas was honest. He didn't pretend to believe when he didn't believe. He didn't say yes with his mouth while his heart said no. He expressed his doubt openly. And Jesus didn't condemn him for doubting. Jesus appeared to him, showed him the wounds, answered the doubt with presence, and Thomas became one of the most fervent apostles, taking the gospel to India and dying as a martyr. Padre Pio said that the story of Thomas taught something important. God isn't afraid of our honest doubts. God knows how to deal with them. What God can't do is answer doubts that aren't honest. Doubts that are actually rejection in disguise. There were also specific practices that Padre Pio taught to those who were going through a period of doubt. The first practice was not to make important decisions during doubt. He said that doubt is like a storm, and during the storm, you don't change direction. You maintain the course and wait for the storm to pass. Many people, during periods of doubt, abandon the church, stop praying, make drastic changes, and when the storm passes, they regret it deeply. The second practice was to maintain spiritual routines, even without feeling anything. Go to Mass even when it seems empty. Pray even when it seems useless. Confess even when you don't feel emotional remorse. Padre Pio said that these practices are like medicine. You don't need to feel the medicine working for it to work. You just take the medicine and trust that it's taking effect. The third practice was to replace thoughts with actions. When the mind starts to spin in doubts, don't try to overcome the thoughts with more thoughts. Go out and do something good for someone. Visit a sick person. Help a poor person. Serve those in need. Charity illuminates the mind in ways that no argument can. The fourth practice was spending time in nature. Padre Pio used to say that creation speaks of God in ways that no book can. Gaze at the stars, contemplate the mountains, listen to the silence of a forest. These experiences reconnect the soul with the Creator in ways that transcend reason. The fifth practice was avoiding certain company during times of doubt. Cynical people and people who ridicule faith, people who fuel doubts instead of helping to resolve them. During periods of vulnerability, these companions can be fatal to faith. If you're struggling with doubts right now, I invite you to do something. First, examine what kind of doubt you have. Is it honest or arrogant? Do you really want the truth? Or do you just want excuses? Are you seeking or are you running away? If your doubt is honest, don't be afraid. Continue seeking, continue asking, but also continue praying, continue trusting, continue loving. The answer will come. Maybe not as you expect, maybe not when you want it to, but it will come. If your doubt is arrogant, be honest with yourself. What are you avoiding? What sin don't you want to abandon? What change don't you want to make? The answer to your doubts isn't in more arguments, it's in more surrender. And if you don't know what kind of doubt you have, seek help. Seek a priest. Seek a spiritual director. Seek someone who can help you discern. May Padre Pio intercede for all who struggle with doubts. May Our Lady, seat of wisdom, illuminate confused minds, and may, from this day forward, your doubts become stepping stones that lead you closer to God, not doors that lead you away from Him. Remember the words of Padre Pio, honest doubt is a friend of faith. It's the fire that purifies gold. It's the storm that strengthens roots. It's the darkness that prepares the eyes to see the light. Don't be afraid of your questions. Be afraid only of stopping to seek the answers. And also remember, God is not in a hurry. God knows how to wait. God knows the right time for each revelation. If you're in a tunnel of doubt now, keep walking. The light is ahead. You may not see it yet, but it is there. And when you finally get out of the tunnel, you'll understand that every step in the darkness was worth it. And if you want to support this work, if you want me to continue bringing these teachings of Padre Pio that can transform your faith, you can click on the golden heart of the super thanks down below. Every support is a chance to help more people find answers. Every support is you participating in the mission of strengthening faith in times of doubt. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever gone through a dark night of the soul filled with doubt? What was it like? What helped you get through it? Your story might be the light that someone else needs to keep believing. Padre Pio once said that he preferred a heart full of honest doubts to a heart full of empty certainties, because the first is seeking, the second is stagnant. The first can find God, the second thinks it has already found Him and stopped looking. May you be like that man in the confessional booth. May your doubts be honest, may your heart be open, and may one day, when you least expect it, Padre Pio look at you and say, you are closer to God than you imagine. Stay with God, and may Padre Pio bless you.